Hello, my name is Melissa Hauke, and I'm giving a presentation on sustained silent reading for adults. Get my presentation started here. So today, I'm going to be talking about why you should dedicate time for this beneficial strategy. My objectives for this presentation is to give you a short review of the literature, to give you some anecdotal evidence from some surveys that I gave to my students, give you a few online reading resources, and then explain how you can implement this into your classroom. So why should we allow our adult students to read during class? So you're thinking, I have my students for 90 minutes or maybe 2.5 hours, and I have a lot of content I need to cover with them. I just don't have time for this. But now you're telling me I should. So let me try to convince you over the next 20 minutes about why you will want to do this. So the literature shows that when we're teaching our English language learners, that reading is really beneficial for them. And there are 4 reasons why and how it improves their English acquisition. So first, it improves their writing skills, right? And we know that our language learners have a hard time with writing grammatically correct sentences and paragraphs and essays, right? So when they're reading, they're seeing English perhaps at its best, right? The style and the prose of it. We also know that we can't teach our students every word that they need. So this is a great way for them to learn new vocabulary as they're reading. Also along the same lines of the writing component, it also improves grammar because now the students can see grammar in print and they can see the different tenses that they might be running across. They can see how the grammar is used correctly. And last, but maybe the most important, is that giving them time to read will increase their reading fluency, right? The more they do something, the better they are at it, as with anything. And the more fluent they're reading, the better able they're going to be able to comprehend what they're reading. So think about that. When you're reading something pretty quickly and you're not having to pause to figure out things, your comprehension is a lot better. Works the same way for them too. So if this isn't enough reason for you to start using sustained silent reading in your classroom, here's a few more. So reading fiction fosters empathy, right? So when we're reading fiction, we see how the characters in that story react to different situations that they're placed in. So for us, it may give us an example or a model of how we can react in a situation, or it can help us to better understand how someone else is reacting in a situation, right? Especially if we don't understand that particular culture or that particular situation ourselves. It also is going to stimulate our imagination and our creativity. So if you think about when you're reading a fiction book, it comes alive to you, right? You can see that place that you're reading about in your mind, in your imagination, and maybe you think about the characters, or you think, oh, I hope the story ends this way. So we're working on that creativity, which is so important when we want students to stretch themselves and to be able to write for them as well, right? Promoting self-improvement. So our students who like to read nonfiction, a lot of times they're reading like self-help books. For example, how to manage your time better, how to manage your money better, maybe eat healthier, how to do yoga. So they're trying to find ways to improve their lives, which they can do from reading. We also know that the better you can read, the likelihood that your job prospects will be better too. So we want our students to have good jobs where they can have success and live a comfortable life. So if we can help them improve their reading, they will succeed in this. And the last thing, which is important for our students who are going on to college or who are planning to get their GED, they need to have this reading stamina. They need to be able to read for long periods of time. And if we get them into the habit of reading, then they'll be able to do this on their own and work to read longer than just 15 minutes that we give them. So I did a few surveys and a few interviews over the last 6 or 8 months. I taught 4 different ABE classes, and I had about 20 students in each class. And so I can see that about 61 students responded to my survey, and most of them were language learners, and they were all aspiring to get their GED. So I asked them some questions about reading. On the very first class, I asked them, do you like to read? And nicely enough, almost everybody likes to read to some extent. Only one student doesn't like to read. And I can still remember her. She was in my first class, and she was like, I don't like it. And I accepted that, just with the idea that maybe she might change her mind by the end of our time together. I then wanted to know how they felt about reading, and surprisingly, the majority of them thought that reading was easy. So that's good. We don't have to convince them that that reading isn't hard, right? That it is easy to do. Although, even though they liked reading and they thought it was easy, they still weren't reading that much. Most people were reading a few times a week to once or twice a month. So in general, not as much as we might want them. We want them to be reading every day, because that is going to do those things that I talked about earlier, helping with their English acquisition, as well as building that reading stamina. I wanted to know if they had reading materials in their home, because we don't want the lack of reading materials to be a barrier from them doing this. So I was pleased to see that everybody had some materials in their home, even if it was limited. So they do have some. And a few actually wanted more reading materials, which I thought was really good. I always provided reading materials for them, and I also talked about the public library, which is a free service for them to use, and that I encouraged them to go there because there were so many options when they went to the library. And the last question I asked was about, I wish I had more time to read. And when I saw the results to this, I knew that I was doing the right thing by giving them this 15 minutes at the beginning of each class, right, this quiet reading time, because they really needed that and they really wanted it. I find that students have been working all day, they get to class, they're tired, somebody has been making a demand on them all day long. And so when class begins, this is a sort of like 15 minutes where I say, okay, let's just all relax and read. Right? We're just sort of like, and everybody, you can see everybody just the stress of the day kind of falls away as they read. And it's really a great thing. And I'm reading too. So I really believed when I saw this that this was the right thing to do. Some comments that I remember when we would talk either towards the end of the sessions or just in general after we would be reading. The one woman who didn't like reading, after 8 weeks, decided that it wasn't so bad. A young woman said, I told my husband that I am going to start reading every day because, I can learn so much and it will make me so much smarter. And then another student recently told me, he said, you know, when you meet new people, sometimes you don't have anything to talk about. But when I read the newspaper, there's always something to discuss. And I had to agree with him. I frequently reference reading the newspaper when I start talking to somebody. And interestingly enough, the last one where we see that our students are reading their children's books, which is good, right? When we think about children's books, they have pictures, the storyline is a little simpler, or if they're reading nonfiction, there's still those pictures and diagrams, and it's giving them really important information or interesting information in a simpler form. So I always encouraged them to read their children's books and to read those books with their children. So what about reading materials? What kind of reading materials do our students want, and what kind of reading materials am I going to recommend to you today? So on the survey, I found out that the top 3 votes were for nonfiction type reading. So they like to read real stuff, right? Newspaper was the most popular. Some also like to read fiction, and of course I said like the kids' books. And there were a lot who liked to read the Bible too, and would even read the Bible during our quiet reading time. So I'm going to talk about 3 of these websites that I specifically like. One of them is Newsella, which is a news website, and it is free, and you can sign in with Google, which makes it really great. No passwords, no usernames to remember. So let me go ahead and go there. I'm already logged in. And the students can log in very easily too. You don't need to give them a class code. They can just log in with Google. If you haven't used this before, you'll see that there's lots of different topics, but still all nonfiction, and then some of the articles are in Spanish. Let me just click on this one so we can look at it a little closer. So there's a couple of things I like about this particular website is that it will read the article aloud to you. You can print it out as well. And you can set the Lexile level. So this particular article has 720 words, and it's at a 9th grade reading level, more or less. I can change the Lexile level I can go all the way to 600, which then turns this into a 3rd grade reading level at 324 words. So the content is basically the same. They've just taken out a lot of the extra information, but still the main idea of this particular article is still there. It's just a little bit shorter and a little bit easier to read. So the students can do that for themselves, right? As they're reading, they can choose which of those Lexile levels they want. I remember one student, she said to me, it's a little hard, I didn't quite understand everything. And so I directed her over to that option of changing how long it was. And she really liked that. So that really helped a lot. So back on here. So again, there is a writing activity as well. And there's this Newsella Pro, which is a paid section, but I think for independent reading, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. I think if you were going to use it more for instruction, you could have it, but just for this independent reading or sustained silent reading time, it's probably fine like that. The next one is Voice of America. Now, maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. If you've used it, maybe you used it in the past and kind of forgot about it. It is a great website, and it's designed for language learners. It is free. There's no sign-in required. So let me go over there. We can look at that. I typically forget about this website, but it's really good. As you can see, there are 3 levels to it. Also a U.S. History tab. Here's today's article, Nobel Peace Prize awarded to journalist, right, which I heard on the news today. If you're beginning level, there's some just learning English as well, how to pronounce words, news words, right? At the intermediate level, there is more available. So there's different articles and different topics as well. Also English in a Minute, where they might give you a phrase or an idiom and how to use it. Grammar, which we all love. Our students love grammar, right? And then on down to the advanced level, right? Everyday grammar, American stories, words in their stories. So really a nice variety of things here for our students who are learning English. So I would highly recommend that you at least introduce the students to that. As I said, I typically forget about it, but it's designed just for language learners. Okay, and my third one is EPIC. I learned about this one a couple of years ago, and I like this. It's free, but it is limited. So let me share that one with you as well. I think I already opened it. Let me just go over here. So what happens is they can get one book a day on the limited edition, which is free, but it is one book a day. And you can explore by the grade. So, for our adults, I would go 7th grade plus. And then you can see some choices there. Call of the Wild, a nice chapter book, some picture books. But even the picture books aren't just like simple. Oh, there's White Fang. And you can see some of them are Read to Me, some of them are audio books. So there's a nice, a nice variety of books here. A Big Nate, I wasn't going to recommend that one necessarily. But I can look at it. Here's one on landslides or hurricanes. So again, this nonfiction. And you can see it, table of contents. So there's quite a bit to it. One thing I was noticing recently when I was looking at it is some of the words that are bolded.
Satellite.
Isn't that nice? It shows them how to pronounce it and then gives the definition for those. So that's Get Epic. So free but limited. You can find fiction and nonfiction, picture and chapter books, and then, and even some videos as well. So how do you do sustained silent reading? How do you incorporate it into your class? Well, it is really easy, and I think you'll all want to do this once I tell you how to do it. Allow 10 to 15 minutes of free reading time. Yep, that's about it. Just allow the class time. Now, I do like to provide optional reading materials, and I also, always remind them of the Newsella website as well. Now, one thing that I like to do is in the Washington Post, on the back of the style section is the kids post, and a lot of times there'll be an article there that's really interesting, and I will just scan it and then put it up on Google Classroom as another reading option. But of course, I always start the reading time with, you can read on Newsella, you can read the article that I posted, or you can read anything that's in your house that you're interested to read. When that time is up, just a quick debrief is really nice. I ask people what they've been reading, tell us a little bit about it. I also share what I've been reading, and I always read during that time and make sure that they can see that I'm reading, because I want to model that good behavior that I want them to do, right? You can share whole group, you can share partners or small groups, but the main thing to remember is that there are no book reports and no paperwork. You're just having fun with this. And the discussions tend to be kind of lively with the adults when they're reading, and they're often interested to see what other people in the group have been reading and what they think about, if they've read the same thing, how they each feel about that particular article or topic that they've read about. All right, have you been persuaded to start sustained silent reading in your classes? I hope so. I hope you can now see the benefits, right? It helps our students with their language acquisition, and it's easy to do. It's almost no planning time for you, and it's just really a win-win situation because the students are gaining from this in so many ways, And so I hope that you will start using sustained silent reading in your next class.